You're listening to the RN Mentor, a podcast designed to document and bring you the work and experience of some of the most influential nurses in our profession. We will be sitting down and having a discussion with the leaders of today's nursing world as they share their work, how they navigate their nursing path, and their views on the future of the profession. My name is Ali Tayeb. I am a registered nurse, United States Navy veteran, a Jonas Veterans Healthcare Scholar, and your host for the RN Mentor. Hello and welcome to another episode of the RN Mentor podcast. Today I have the very special honor of bringing you an incredible nurse leader and innovator. I think you're going to love what she's going to share with us. A quick bio on my guest today. As seen on CBS Evening News with Katie Couric, Dr. Scharmaine Lawson is a nationally recognized and award-winning nurse practitioner in New Orleans, Louisiana. She is a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing, fellow of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, winner of the 2013 Healthcare Hero Award and New Orleans City Business Magazine Award, and 2008 Entrepreneur of the Year Award from Advanced for Nurse Practitioner magazine, where she is featured on the magazine cover. She is also the author of the very first advanced practice nurse children's book series entitled NOLA the Nurse, which I'm very excited to talk to her about. This series exposes children from ages 4 to 8 to the world of advanced practice nursing and fosters cultural sensitivity with the multi-ethnic character adventures through different countries. Thank you, and hello to you, Dr.
Hi.
Lawson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello from NOLA.
I'm very. I have 2 little girls, and I have to say, I'm very excited to talk to you about how that whole thing came about, and we'll get to that during our podcast today. This is actually very exciting for me because this is usually when I talk to individuals, it's very much sometimes ends up being research, clinical, things like this. So NOLA is a very different thing, and I have a little bit of artsy side to me, so that's why I'm excited to talk about that. But before we get to NOLA, I always like to, like I mentioned in all my podcasts, I always like to start talking about my guests and their journey into the world of nursing. So how did you decide nursing was the pathway for you, and how did that journey start?
Sure, that's a great question. And I just have to be honest with you. I wasn't one of those little girls who was just saying, oh, I want to be a nurse when I grow up. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to do it. I just didn't start out like that. Ironically, I wanted to be a musician, and I played music for most of my life. I played the trumpet. I was team brass all of my life. And that's something I thought that I wanted to do. But I also took an interest in the sciences and especially nursing. And I was fortunate in that the high school I was going to at the time had a CNA program for seniors and juniors and seniors who would be interested in nursing. You could go and you could get a certified nursing assistant certificate. And, hopefully, once you graduate, you would have your certificate, and that, in turn would introduce you into the field of nursing. And so I said, well, I'm interested in science. And I think that nursing is something that I'd want to do. So while I was playing in the band, I, of course, multitasking young as I was in high school, I said, let me try nursing too. And what do you know, nursing, it has a way of taking over everything in your life. So I had to eventually quit the band because I had fallen in love with nursing, and the patients that I met and the senior nursing staff that I met at the time just sort of encouraged me to continue seeking out, getting into nursing and to see what it was about. So eventually after becoming a CNA, after high school, I enrolled and got accepted into Dillard University here in New Orleans and into their BSN program. And that was just sort of where it all started, what sort of sparked the germ of nursing in my soul, in my blood. And once I got into it, I said, "Oh my, this is perfect for someone who's type A." It's like I can I can be every kind of nurse ever. I can do everything. And literally, if you look at the trajectory of my career, I've worked in, oh gosh, just about everything, and it's been an extremely rewarding ride that I wouldn't change for the world, and I would totally encourage anyone who's interested in diversity of profession, or diversity of just freedom to be in a profession where you can just go in any little niche and still offer care. It's unbelievable.
That's fantastic. Now you mentioned a high school program, and one of the and this is just a sort of a thought in the back of my head right now as you were talking. We like at the university that I'm teaching, even though we're in LA, we do not have a huge number of Black students that come
Mhm,
into the profession of nursing.
mhm,
And how was that? How did the fact that there's a high school program that
mhm.
actually brought you in? I think is a
Yeah.
fantastic idea, and something I've been playing around with the thought with of how do we get to uh, the how do we get to the community before they come into the university so we pique that interest? And I think that's one of the beauties of, I think, NOLA, again
Mhm.
bringing that up. But how do we get that interest in the community? Because this has come up in a few of my podcasts where we talk about diversity in
Mhm.
nursing, and nursing is not necessarily representative of the communities we serve.
Correct.
So how does that happen? How does what's your opinion on how do we get that interest in the young, diverse population, and have them come into the
Yeah.
world of nursing?
Absolutely, and definitely having a high school program similar to the one I went through is certainly an excellent way to start for the high school students. The program that I was in, we actually went to a totally different facility twice a week. We would go to a facility offsite away from campus that was basically a lab, a learning nursing lab, if you will. And we had the mannequins there. We were able to learn blood pressure. We got introduced to venipuncture. We got introduced to charting, introduced to just basic communication skills, and it was just really a phenomenal experience. And we it was sort of two step. A few weeks you got introduced to the basics, as vital signs, and then after that, we went with the teachers or the nursing instructors to clinical sites in nursing homes and hospitals. And we got to do, just like the candy striper type work, telling my age there when I say candy striper, but you know what I mean. We got to do those little things that really sort of what spark the germ in anyone to consider nursing, because you get a chance to actually see what it's like to have caring in action. And a lot of times you think of nursing, you think, it's all about, especially when you're on advanced practice level like myself, some of them will say now that they've arrived, oh, it's all about, nurse practitioners, and we need full practice authority, and, we need to prescribe and, assess, diagnose, and treat. And, I would like to say, let's take it back and remember that caring begins at the bedside. And it's something as simple as, filling a pitcher of water, no ice, or, getting someone a bedpan, or giving a back rub, giving those great, massages after a bed bath, just, turn Q2, that's where it all starts. And everything else just grows from there. Your willingness to be a nurse and in this profession should really begin with care, and care begins at the bedside. That's where it starts. That's where we are. And that's where, if we can bring that to the inner city youth, and let them know that, yes, there are higher levels to this, But if we can get them to see that care begins very simply, with how are you today? My name is, Anne, or my name is Bob, my name is Robert, my name is Malik, whatever your name is. And, I'd love to help you today. Is there anything I can do for you? It starts there and teaching them how to have these simple interactions with patients who are vulnerable and who may not want to speak back to them. And that's okay. It's part of communication with someone who's healing and hurting. And it's okay. It's don't take offense to it, but learn how to communicate with others who are in pain. And of course, Nola the nurse, you need to even take it a little further and catch them younger and say, baby, sweetheart, a 4-year old, can you at least say nurse practitioner? Can we get a part of the conversation going? Yeah, you want to be a doctor. Yeah, I want to be a lawyer. But I need you to start saying CRNA. I need you to start saying, nurse practitioner, and let's start the dialogue. And that's what the whole premise of the NOLA the Nurse series was about, is that, let's get the conversation going, because when I was looking for books for my daughter, who was a baby at the time, I said, well, let me find something, that talks about what mommy does. And there was nothing out there that even discussed the role of the advanced practice nurse. Period. Nothing. And then me always pushing envelopes said, well, let me find someone who has some melanin, that, she can see. And unfortunately, there was nothing there, not only in Kid Lit, but just period about the nursing profession in general. So I said, well, as a nurse, we fix things. We're fixers, right? So we've got to fix this. And that's how it all started, the whole NOLA the Nurse brand. That's how we started. Now, 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Before we get into NOLA, you sparked a couple of things in my head that I want to talk to you about. And literature is definitely one of them, that there is an underrepresentation. Just the fact that I have a 9 and 11-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. And when I was getting excited when they would find a doll that isn't white, and they were excited about playing with it, and those kinds of things. And I think is so important to introduce them to. Like the first elementary schools they went to, my wife is a teacher, and she was in a diverse population elementary school. She teaches children with autism, and she was in a very diverse, low income school, and we didn't send our kids to the local school. We sent them to that school, so they have, because our school our local school is more white. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that they have exposure to different people and different cultures, and so we sent them to my wife's school just to introduce them to difference, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's very important to have that representation, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's talk about NOLA, as you brought it up. So 5 years ago, it started as more of a need, I would say. So talk to us about NOLA. How did NOLA grow to become this? I don't want to call it a product, because I think it's more than a product.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, you could say it's a product with a purpose. Let's just say that. But so it started in 2015, and that's when actually I published the first book. I had began writing them, long before then. My daughter is now 10, but when she was a baby, I began looking for books to just sort of talk about, just in any way, about what I did as a nurse practitioner, because I wanted her to just begin to see what I did. Kids are visual. They look and learn, through reading and through doing activities. And so I said, well, let me just look for something. And so I began my search, the usual places, Barnes and Noble, and start searching online, Amazon. And I just really could not find anything that was written on the children's level then she was baby. So, on the level low enough, whereas it just began the conversation about the other viable members of the healthcare team, which are your APNs. It's not just nurse practitioners, of course. We have the midwives, we have, CRNAs, and CNSs in some places. So, it just didn't exist. And so that was one reason I wrote it, because I wanted it to exist. But it was twofold in that I also realized the shortage of multicultural aspect in kid lit and children's literature, not just with African American children, but just children of color in general were just underrepresented in all of the books that I saw. And so I said, well, I'm definitely going to make NOLA. She's going to be African American, and NOLA, of course, is short for New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where it started. Right, for those who are confused about NOLA, so NOLA, the nurse, which is an acronym for New Orleans, Louisiana. And I get a lot of questions about, and I'll address this now, is why, since it's about APNs, well, it's like NOLA the nurse, and it should say NOLA the nurse practitioner, and it should say, it's okay, let's clear the air right now for everyone who has something to contribute. All right, to my narrative, right? So I'm gonna straighten it out for you. All right, so it was really more or less a marketing move, if you will. NOLA the nurse practitioner to me was just a little more restrictive as to, okay, this is everybody who gets this book, yeah, it's all about nurse practitioners, and that's just it. Whereas the book is not just about nurse practitioners, it's about all APNs, CRNAs. We have Maddie the midwife, we have Bax the nurse, who's actually a nurse practitioner in training, and so I said we need a global name, so all APNs are what, at the very root, we're nurses, right? So one, since we are nurses, so let's understand this. Okay, so you may be at a doctor level now, but at the end of the day, you are nurse. Okay, all right. And the other part was that it was a calculating thing, because I wanted the driver to be that people who picked up the book to realize, after they've read a few stories and purchased a few more books, they realize that, oh, this is a story about a little girl who wants to not only be a nurse, but she wants to be a nurse practitioner. Right? Right. So it's a type of nurse. So she not only wants to just be a nurse, she wants to be a nurse practitioner like her mom. And what she does is she goes out and visits patients with her mom, who is a nurse practitioner who has a house call practice. Yeah, I know, original, very original, but she has a house call practice. And so she goes with her and learns how to care for sick patients. Of course, NOLA, who's 7, she can't take care of the patients on her own and do that. So she decides, well, I'm going to just go out in the community and take care of my friends and their sick baby dolls. They have sick baby dolls. I'm just going to practice on them. And so what she does, and what I found to be fascinating, if I must say so myself, is that when you go to someone's home, you learn and discover a culture. Each home has a culture, and you have to respect that culture when you go into a home in any way. You have to take off shoes. These days, you need to wash your hands. You need to wear a mask in most homes, whatever it is. But the point is, it's a culture. And so I created in each story a different culture for NOLA to visit when she goes to a home. So the first culture is Kenya, and she gets to learn about, of course, what nurse practitioners do, but she also gets to eat a meal from Kenya. It's called matoke. So each book has a culture that NOLA visits in these homes, and they get to eat a meal from that particular culture. Why? Because eating is universal. It's social. We love it. You go to somebody's home, especially here in the South. I can speak for the Southerners. You go to their home and they say, "Honey, let me get you some red beans and rice. You want some gumbo?" They want to feed you, and it's very social. So and it's part of love as well, because as a healthcare provider, if you're going to the homes, you become family. And they say, "Honey, let's sit down and have some beignets before we start talking about our blood pressure. We need to drink some coffee, whatever." Right. And that's how it is. So in the spirit of, reality and how it is to visit a home, I said it's very appropriate to have them finish a meal at the end of each story. And then I just provided the recipes for these meals. It just says lanyap, just so, people can say, "Oh, it's fancy." It's just a little recipe of, matoke at the end. But the point is to, introduce children to the world of advanced practice nursing, and also foster cultural sensitivity simultaneously.
Well, that is very insightful on your part, because I think just the idea of you're introducing so much at such a young age, I think is extremely extremely beneficial. Um, for I think some grown-ups could probably read some of your books as well and learn something. Um, now I know Nola does this house visit thing, which is also something that you do.
Yes.
So I don't want people. I want everyone to know that the house call thing isn't this abstract idea, but you
No.
actually do this. Uh,
Yes.
how is
Yes.
that experience? How did you get involved in that? Because
Yes.
that's not a most people, when they think nurse practitioner, I'm going to work in a clinic, I'm going to work
Yeah.
in a hospital, whatever. How did this piece come about? How did you get involved with that?
Yeah, sure. And I like to say that there really is no accident. Things don't just, miraculously, oh, this is, just by chance. I don't believe in coincidences. I just like to say that most of my life I've worked, as you heard me say earlier, in just about every specialty in nursing, and home health was a part of it. In my history, when I lived in DC at the time, I worked with the Visiting Nurse Association, and I did that and loved it. So home health was always my background. Now let's fast forward to 2003, 2004. I was an NP, just regular working, at a clinic, local clinic here in New Orleans, and a physician approached me and said that she was going to be retiring. And she said, I have a house call practice, and if you're interested, I'm happy to, transfer the care to you. I've spoken with the patients and I'll be your collaborator. And so the first thing out of my mouth was, what, you mean like Marcus Welby? Again, I'm aging myself, but that was my thing. I was like, what do you mean house calls? Like, because, again, I had done home health as a nurse, but never as a nurse practitioner. So the idea was so intriguing to me. I said, oh, wow. So I really get to do holistic care, like everything in the home. Oh yeah, sign me up, right? And so I did. I started doing it for a few months with her 15 patients, and then by the time, I'd say I started it officially in March of 2005 with getting my LLC and real bank account and that sort of thing. And so that was March of 2005. But by the time August of 2005 came around, that 15 patients grew from 15 to 100. So I knew then that there was a need in the community. I was going out into the rural areas of Louisiana, providing primary care to many, many citizens who were in many cases bedbound. So they're not just homebound, but they were bedbound. And little did I know that I had at that time had started the first NP owned house call practice in the state of Louisiana. Had no idea of what I was doing. I didn't, and that's how most things happen. You don't realize that you are birthing a dream, or you are, doing something really, really spectacular. Right at the time, you're just saying, you know what, I want to meet a need. I want to help my community, and I want to improve healthcare accessibility. And those were my goals. I said, I want to improve, access to healthcare. I want to get some good outcomes from this community. And more importantly, I just want to make sure that as many people in this community receive the care who need it and who deserve it, and who, more importantly, who are not able to get it. Let's make that happen.
That's great. And this sort of comes from my own ignorance. I don't have this part memorized. So is New Orleans or is Louisiana? Is it a full practice state?
And I need to say unequivocally, no,
Okay.
no, no, and no. I mean, just look at the map, just in general. And I kind of study the map at least weekly, if not monthly. And in that, unfortunately, most of the states that are southern are not FPA, and that's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. I'm longing for the day, and I do believe I'll be alive when when we do get FPA. But as for now, we are a yellow state, which is good. We're not red. We're yellow, meaning that we are collaborative. We have to have a collaborating physician in order to practice. Yes, there are hurdles to getting one, and it's frustrating, but what are you going to do? We all can't move out of Louisiana, right? So we work with it, and we find, very good collaborating physicians who are committed to the mission and who are willing to work with us. So it's working.
That's great. I'm in California, and we're
Mm.
definitely not anywhere near where we need to be. So
Mm-mm.
moving to California isn't going to help anyone with full practice either. And it's unfortunate because while we're recording this, we are in the middle of a pandemic,
Yes.
and I know some of those practice uh, barriers have loosened up.
Some of
But
them.
I know
Mhm.
there's talk again about tightening those up again, which absolutely makes no sense.
None.
None at all.
Mm.
This house call piece was definitely. I always imagine when people say house calls. I imagine the small leather bags with the
Yeah, I
stethoscope.
have one.
See, there you go. I was going to ask, do
I
you have
have one. I do, and I never use it. Okay,
one?
let's just be real. Let me just be real transparent with that. I never use it. It's just something that I just had to have. I said, I have to have a little black bag, So I think I've used it maybe once or twice. So my usual is a backpack. I have a backpack and or a messenger bag, and just very few essentials inside those one of those two bags, and that's kind of how it works. And because if you look at the actual little black bag, you can't fit a laptop in there. So you know,
It's for the nostalgia of having one, right?
right? It is.
It's
It
just
really,
pure.
really is. And photo ops.
Yep, yep, exactly. That's great. Thank you. Now, I wanted to talk about a little bit about how you got into advanced practice. We kind of I went a little backwards, but how did you get? What was your motivation into getting into advanced practice?
Yeah, sure. So let's go back to when we talked initially early on when I said I always wanted to be a musician. So I'm just going to say this now and broadcast it across all the airways, wherever you're going to be producing this. Yes, initially I wanted to be a musician and I never lost that dream, right? Never did. So most of you all know my grandmother raised me. And when she passed, that was in 1996. And so I said, you know what? I think now that I no longer am, head of household, so to speak, I don't really have someone who's depending on me. I said, maybe now I can go and be a musician. Let me see, right? Because I can live off of peanut butter, but if you're trying to support somebody, it's like, no, they need real food. So I said, I can go and be a starving musician, so to speak, and move to Nashville. That's how I wound up at Tennessee State. It's like, I'm gonna move to Nashville and I'm gonna be a musician. So I moved to Nashville and had me a little band, and I said, okay, this will work, until I started to have to pay studio time and some other things, and we had no record. And I said, well, listen, I'm going to stick with what I really know. So at the time, somebody that I was hanging out with, he said, why don't you think about, being a CRNA? Because I was working on level 1 trauma at Vandy. And I said, oh, okay. And that's the thing about listening to someone else's dream. You have to have a dream within you and know yourself and know what you really want. And so I considered going back for CRNA. And so I worked level 1 trauma, did the whole thing. And then I realized that just taking a really introspective look at my personality, I was more of the type of person whereas I needed to be out and about, with working. I love, again, back to home health, right? There are tie-ins all over my life and your life as well, if you think about it. So I said, I like being out. I like really the uncertainty, of course, the adrenaline of ER and the trauma. But overall, I'm not the type of person who really wants to work 12 hours all day, every day and stand on my feet. I'd like to have some mobility with what I do and with the care that I deliver. So that's when I started looking at being a nurse practitioner, and I shadowed a nurse practitioner and saw how she worked at a community clinic, a local FQHC in the area. And I really, really loved it because it was just so freeing. And I liked how she took care of, a 2-week old all the way up to, her oldest patient was 106. And it was just amazing. And it was just, it was me. So again, when you're trying to decide, between different specialties, you really have to look at what's your personality and what you like. And I found that environment just suited me well. So I signed up, took some classes at Vandy, but later decided on Tennessee State because Tennessee State University was offering scholarships at the time for minorities. They had gotten a big Title VIII grant or something. And so I enrolled, got the scholarship, got my master's paid for, which was score great. So I did that. And once I finished, uh, you know what it means to miss New Orleans, honey. I moved back to New Orleans because the city just calls you forever. Just you can't get away from it. One of those things. Anybody who is from New Orleans, it's like, oh, stop calling me, but I had to come back. So I moved back in 2000, started working as an NP. And like most nurses, honey, we will go to school forever. We will have all kinds of certifications and all kinds of little notes that tells us we, have this type of master's. We have everything, right? And so in 2008, I said, well, I got to get this DNP. Everybody's calling me doctor anyway. So what is everybody talking about? And you telling me I don't have to do research, really? So I don't have to go to school 10 years to be a PhD, but I can be a doctor and still, conduct some research, have a scholarly project, and I can do, maybe improve some outcomes on my own. And just, I love the whole scope and the premise behind the DNP. So I said, look, I got to get that. And so that's when I went back and, did the DNP at Chatham University. And then just kind of, again, here we go again. You know how nurses are. We got to get more paper, more stuff. So I'm prescribing and treating, family practice every day. But then it becomes, oh my God, I'm treating or having to treat so many patients who have psychiatric disorders simply because of the shortage. So I said, listen, I got to go back and get the certification. So here I am again, here I am again today, working on my postmaster's psychiatric certification. And I'll be done with that in about 2 more semesters next year.
Wow, so, that's amazing.
There you go.
It's I want to say it's almost addictive. I think there's some of us out there that are just addicted to school, and you would never guess that looking at me in high school.
Right. I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I did not enjoy school at all. But I keep going back, and actually, I was. I'm sure Dr. McLemore. Her and I were talking on a podcast, and I had to confess, I was like. I was talking to my wife about thinking about going back for my master's in public health. So it's one of those things that's you're like, oh, there's a piece of knowledge that is missing from my tool belt, and I'm like, I need to go back for this, and so.
And you will use it. I know you will.
Right. I mean, it's sort of a necessity, but like there's a drive to do it. Like there's a piece of thing because I need that piece. It's like having a puzzle, but missing a piece.
Correct.
So you need to go and find that piece, and I think that's what schooling or certifications and those kinds of things kind of fill. And I always tell people, because people say, "Why did you go back for your PhD?" And another thing that's come up in a few conversations, and I always say, well, initially it was really the IOM report on the future nursing report, right? I read it and I said, we need this many more nurses that are doctorally prepared. I'm like, hey, I could do that, right? Like I could be one of those people that contributes to this report. And also, I didn't want to ever be in a position where my degree was my limitation, or the piece of knowledge I needed was my limitation. Now that I have the PhD, I'm looking at other things, other work that I'm doing. I'm like, well, this really falls into public health, but I want to do the work, right? Because it's intersecting with the work that I'm doing. I'm like, well, that's another piece that I'm missing.
I get it.
So, you mentioned nothing happens. You don't believe in coincidences, right? Yeah. And you need to plan. You plan. You sound like a planner.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I always like to tell people. I mean, some things do happen by coincidence, but it's your preparation that gets you to that point where people all are looking at you to fulfill a need because they know you have the knowledge, the skill set, all that stuff. So that stuff, some of it is planning. The fact that you happen to be in a situation where people call on you, that may be coincidence. Even that, you can blame networking or something.
Right. Else. Yeah. Right.
There's always a connection somewhere. You're not sitting in your house on the couch and somebody accidentally calls you. Right.
Right.
So I think that there's that component. So, I mean, just looking at the different paths, and you've mentioned a few people in your life that have talked to you and sort of maneuvered your way to kind of where you are. How do you the podcast is about mentorship, and how did some of the individuals influence your life as to where you are, or you had your friend that kind of said told you with the CRNA. Your NOLA happened as a necessity, even though it wasn't sort of out of mentorship, but
Right.
it was somebody that you felt there was a need to provide something for. Um, your grandmother that raised you. How did those things happen? Do you have formal mentors, or do you? Um, how does that work for you?
Yeah, yeah. So I've had along the way a formal mentor, if you will, meaning that someone that I've spoken with about, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? It's I hate to say the word formal, because formal means that, okay, you're my mentor. I know it. You realize you're my mentor. Let's have these,
It's
weekly
more
conversations kind of
it's
thing. Yeah.
more contractual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in case you maybe not realized it about me, I'm kind of like not a real contractual type person. I'm kind of like, okay, how's this feeling? Yeah, let's shake on it kind of person. Like, okay, your word is your bond kind of thing. That's how I was raised. So, um, this person has been just pretty instrumental in my life, just overall. It's Captain James Dickens. He was my sponsor for FAANP, and we've been friends for, gosh, we often kid each other. I think it hasn't been too long, maybe 2006 or seven, somewhere in there, where we were both getting an award from AANP, and we remember it vividly, like it was yesterday. We were there at the new harbor that was built on DC in DC, and we were just getting an award, and we just how when you have like minds, you just sort of just gravitate, and you just always are just kind of there. And he's just been a very strong professional force for me for most of my career, and so he's whenever there's something that comes up, I'll just always text him or call him and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And he just, mentors are amazing in that, they get your crazy, your crazy ideas. They get it because, they're, and I don't mean it, as crazy as a bad word, because it's not in this case, meaning that they get your chaos and they get how, your brain works and how you think about things. And they constantly push you and support you and rally behind you and will get other supporters if needed. When it was time for me to, submit for FANP for the fellowship, he was so instrumental in helping me find a secondary sponsor and just really, really helping me when I was unable to find additional sponsors, in my area, in my geographic location. He just kind of said, listen, I believe in your body of work, and we're going to make this happen. And that's the pivotal role, I believe, of a mentor, is that they believe in you and rally behind you when you either don't see where it's going, or when, in some cases, like Margaret Fitzgerald, I'm happy to mention her. She's been my mentor for a number of years, and she literally spearheaded me with getting FAAN when I was going up for, the application to become FAAN. Margaret Fitzgerald was my sponsor, and she literally, and I tell this story all the time whenever I give my keynote speeches. I talk about how fear is paralyzing. And I really became consumed after working for months on the application with her and Dr. Sheldon Fields, who's another mentor. Working on the application for months, I became consumed with imposter syndrome when it came down to submitting the application. We had been working for about 6 or 8 months, and just all of a sudden it was time to submit. And I said, listen, I don't know if I can do this. I made up some type of little excuse about, I think a hurricane or something was coming, and I'm not lying. I'm telling you, the Scouts honor or whatever. I said, listen, I can't do this. I became consumed with, you know, I'm this little colored girl, from the projects in New Orleans. Girl, what are you doing? Do you realize that this is the highest honor you can get as a nurse? Girl, go sit down. And I was just talking to myself like, girl, you ain't gonna be able to do that. You can't do that. Those people don't want you. Those things that you try to talk to yourself about. And listen, at this time when I was applying, I had just been on the Harry Connick show. I had just done like all these monumental things, had just been like, hanging out with Katie Couric, been featured in Forbes, all these places. And I was still like thinking, me? There's no way. And so I said, look, I'm not going to be able to do it. And here's the pivotal role again of a mentor. They help you when you don't see who you are, and in some cases when you are unable to move because of fear, and you're letting it paralyze you. Margaret Fitzgerald said, okay, here's the situation. You can say whatever you want to say. You can say you don't have the money, whatever, but I'm submitting and paying for you right now. Period. So you can go over there and say whatever and feel however you want to feel. I'm going to acknowledge that, your feelings are valid. Nurses, your feelings are valid, but, but I'm going to submit and pay for you while you mull this over and go through your feelings. I'm going to act on your behalf because I believe in you. And that's the role of the mentor. You act on behalf of the mentee when they have somehow lost their vision and desire for wanting to go forward, or when they're just too weak because they're paralyzed with fear, and they've sort of become discouraged about the big picture. Mentors look at the bigger picture, and often the bigger picture is beyond you. And sometimes it can be overwhelming, discouraging, and it renders you immobile. And that's when true mentors step in and move the needle for you, and that's your role.
That's thank you for sharing that. This is, I mean, that's an amazing piece of knowledge to share, and this is actually I want to say the second time that you've mentioned it's about sponsorship. And actually, the conversation I just had with Dr. Montalvo, she said it's mentorship is one thing, but it should really be sponsorship. Is individuals that are sponsoring you, that are helping you get to the next level, or opening those doors for you, so you can. They're not doing the work for you, but they're making opportunities available. Is really what's happening. And I think that's where there's the value of such a mentor or sponsor really comes into play. So that's amazing that you have those individuals in your life. And again, it didn't happen accidentally. I'm sure there was a lot of work that went in there that you put in, and I think imposter syndrome, or anything else anybody else wants to call it, is a reality.
It is.
I think I struggle with it all the time. I'm doing that, like the coronavirus healthcare professionals memorial art, that thing that I'm doing.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think that's amazing.
Thank you. And I'm working on this in the garage, and I keep telling my wife every couple of days, I'm like, who wants to look at this? Why am I who wants to? So that's one of my things, is like, and then I come up with these ideas. I'm like, yeah, this came out really nice, but I'm like, but who else wants to look at this? I'm impressing I have these moments for myself. I'm like, this is going to sit in my garage and nobody's going to want to look at it. But that's my thing right now in my head, as I've been, I put in like a good solid, like I think 30 hours into it so far, but I'm excited to get that out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Before we end our conversation, anything else you want to share? And just before we go, I want to make sure our listeners know links to NOLA, your website. All those are going to be on my site, where the podcast is going to be airing. So anything else you want to share with us? This has been amazing.
Yeah, just in general, I know it may sound cliche-ish, but to all those out there who are dreaming and you're feeling as though, just you see no end in sight, you see no light at the end of the tunnel. You're never going to see the light at the end of the tunnel if you're standing still, right? You've got to walk towards the end of the tunnel, and then the light will eventually be shown. But you're not going to just, achieve the dream. This is the other part of it, being immobile. When I look back on my life, And when I talk to students, giving the keynotes, I say, listen, I didn't get here today by being immobile or by just standing in one place and saying, oh, look at me, I have so much to offer, everything's going to come to me. No, you have to be proactive and extremely aggressive about your goals and dreams, because they're not just going to, come to you. I mean, yeah, we're living in a world now whereas, oh, it's kind of good to be black or to have melanin. A lot of people want to buy into everything, unfortunately, because of what happened, with George Floyd. But the reality is, you have to have something to offer, and you have to show an overall trajectory, or as we like to say here in nursing, what's your body of work? Send me your body of work. And it's just a big old fancy word thing of saying, look, what you got? what you got going on? What's going on? What have you done for me lately? Right?
Right.
What have you done in nursing that would make me want to sponsor you for the highest level of fellowship in nursing? What have you done? Show me your trajectory over time. Right. And I just think that a lot of people somehow, I don't want to talk about millennials because I love them dearly. But there's this whole thing about, they just feel, like, well, people are gonna, give them just something. And no, it's, you always have to come to the table with something and say, well, this is what I have, this is what I've done over time. And if I think if you look back, over my career, is that's what I keep doing. It's like, I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna keep doing. I'm gonna keep writing books. I have people who ask me all the time, well, so what's your end goal? What's your who? And I said, honey, I'm gonna write books till Disney calls me. I'm gonna write books until Oprah calls me, until Netflix, they call me and say, listen, you got 59,000 books out there, and I said, listen, I'm gonna keep writing. It's just, so you have to say, look, I'm gonna continually move towards my goal, because nobody is gonna give you anything if you're immobile. You're just standing there. What are you contributing? Contributing is a verb. It's movement. You have to move towards the goal, and then you eventually see the light at the end of the tunnel, or, if you will, the needle will move towards your overall dream if you move. There's a song, Ludacris, if you move, I move. It's like, well, what's going on? There's no movement. There's no actualization. There's no self-actualization up at the top of the hierarchy. How'd they get there? How you get to the top? We got to have some movement, right?
Absolutely.
So, end of the day, think of movement towards your dream, towards self-actualization, and it'll eventually occur.
And you bring up a great point, because that's one of the things I was talking to one of my master's students last semester, and that's one of the topics that kept coming up. She's all like, I think this is my goal, and I get there, I achieve it, and then there's this other goal waiting for me. So I think that's kind of what you're referring to. It's continuously this. You don't have to. I don't think some of us are ever going to get to the point where we're like, we're satisfied, we're done. This is it. There's always that next step, level of achievement or level of satisfaction, or how else can I contribute? Because I did this, so what's next on the agenda? I think that's a great way to look at it. So thank you.
Yeah, and then too, in terms of how the American Academy of Nursing puts it, and when you're applying, for the fellowship, their big word is impact. What impact have you made? And so your goal should always be impactful. Okay, so you've done something. So why and so what? Should be your other question. So why and so what? Okay, so you wrote a book. Okay, is your book published in China? Is it translated in Swahili? Then why are we talking? Right? You have more of an impact to make. And so that's my thing. It's like, okay, so why and so what? You've done this and done that. Okay, so always think impact, bigger impact, bigger footprint, like Bigfoot. Okay, so think of that. That needs to be your impact. You can't just sit here and say, well, yeah, I did. I got my BSN. And I'm going to say, okay, why? So what? Who did you help? What community did you help? Did you create a program that, had positive outcomes, and now you've, taken care of 100,000 patients? Okay, talk to me when you get to 100,000. Then we can talk. Now you're ready to be a FAAN. Right. And so that's what they want to know. It's like, well, how to be a FAAN? Like, what did you do? Send me your body of work. Then I'll look at your impact, right? I mean, it's a whole full circle here. When you think about it, it's all connected. Like, what's your impact? How have your outcomes been? Okay, so why and so what? It's all linked.
Yep. Definitely. I completely agree. This is it's one of the things that just starting this podcast a few months ago. It was weird because I was like thinking, okay, some people are going to listen to it, and then the numbers kept going up and up, and there's the service I use gives me like the countries that are listening to it, and I'm like 30 plus countries are listening to it. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. There's people from other countries listening.
That's impact. That's impact.
So it was like one of those unexpected things. So you're right. I mean, the fact that you do things not thinking how impactful they're going to be, and then you see some of those outcomes. And I think that's great advice for individuals looking of where they are in their career, and that's a great way to look at it, is what impact am I making, and that's where kind of research, practice, things like that really come into play. That's where mentorship kind of comes into play. If you don't know what impact you're making or how to find out what kind of impact you're making, I think that's where some people who have already been there, done that, can be extremely helpful. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with us and sharing your incredible story. I need to order some of your books just for myself.
Yes, you do.
And again, for our listeners, I will have links to Dr. Lawson's books and websites. And I look forward to continuing to look at your career and what you're doing, and future literature, we'll call them literature, that you're going to come out with. And hopefully Disney will pick this up and make us into a cartoon.
It won't be because I'm not writing. It won't be because I'm not writing, because I'm writing. And I will be writing and hitting publish every time. I don't care. Every quarter, I'm committed. I'm putting it out. It's coming out.
Fantastic.
So,
Fantastic. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate your work. Thank you for giving us your time. We have been listening to Dr. Scharmaine Lawson, an incredible nurse leader, author, mentor, innovator, businesswoman.
Mommy.
That should be top of the list. That should be. So thank you so much, and I wish you a great rest of your week, and have a great one. Bye-bye. You've been listening to the RN Mentor with your host, Ali Tayeb. Please don't forget to visit www.alirtayeb.com. That's www.alirtayeb.com for podcast notes and resources, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, I wish you fair winds and following seas.